Sing Sing is here, and should we just give Domingo his Oscar now? In all seriousness, Domingo does give a brilliant performance here, and we'll dive into that in a little bit, but first, just some context on the film itself. It comes from director Greg Kwedar, who is not super well known, although he is certainly on the rise. This is not his first feature film. He's come out with pieces like Jockey in 2021, but nothing he's done prior to Sing Sing has garnered him nearly as much attention. He made Jockey in partnership with a few folks, but most notably Clint Bentley, who co-wrote Sing Sing with him. This film is based on a true story, which makes it that much more remarkable. It had its premiere back in 2023 at the Toronto International Film Festival, but has taken almost a year to get a wide release. Normally that's a really bad sign. You might be struggling to find distributors who are willing to take it on, to put it in theaters, or even put it on streaming, but in the case of Sing Sing, it's a very calculated maneuver in order to best position the film to have the most folks see it, and also set itself up for success when it comes to award season. Now, as I mentioned, this is based on a true story. It is based on the Rehabilitation Through the Arts, or RTA program at the Sing Sing Maximum Security Prison. Essentially, this program aims to help rehabilitate inmates through theater, through the arts, and ultimately provide inmates an opportunity to connect with themselves on an emotional level, but also connect with each other in a way that men might not always have the opportunity to do, particularly in a maximum security prison setting. The film stars, of course, Colman Domingo playing John Divine G. Whitfield, again based on a real inmate at Sing Sing, who is essentially the de facto leader amongst the inmates when it comes to this theater, this arts program. Alongside Domingo, we have Paul Raci, who is a brilliant actor, probably most well known for his role in the tremendous film from a few years ago, Sound of Metal. He is back in this film playing an employee of the prison that's essentially helping kind of run this theater, this arts program. And outside of Domingo, the most talked about performance for very good reason is Clarence, Divine Eye Maclin, who is playing himself, or at least a version of himself. And I'll dive into his performance alongside Domingo's later, but suffice it to say that it is beyond powerful. The film itself follows these inmates as part of this RTA program as they are rehearsing, getting ready to present to an audience their play titled Breakin' the Mummy's Code that was written by John Raci's character. Of course, part of the film is about embracing a love for theater, but really it is about these individual inmates, their stories, their connections, and their search for some semblance of freedom. The film has its foundation, I suppose you could say, in an article published originally in Esquire titled The Sing Sing Follies by John H. Richardson, which was kind of an ensemble piece about these different inmates and their role in the RTA. Director John Kwedar kind of took this article and went through various versions of the script, again with his co-writer, until they landed on what we see on screen. Originally, they wanted to have a bit more of an ensemble kind of vibe where we get really in-depth backgrounds into each of these individual inmates. They realized at some point that this probably wasn't feasible in only a couple of hours, but through the camera techniques that I'll talk about in a little bit here, they still really did manage to paint individual portraits and not just lump all of these inmates in together. Oh, and I haven't mentioned yet that it's not just Clarence Divine Eye Maclin who was playing a version of himself. Almost every single participant in the RTA, in this film, every inmate close to is actually played by a version of themselves. This is highlighted in the kind of closing credits, where we also get to see real footage from the plays that these inmates put on, so definitely stick around for the credits when this film finishes. Kwedar worked on this film for over 6 years, obviously not in production, but in the development of the story and the script, going through many iterations. But what kind of grounded him was this concept, this idea that he needs to listen first. He couldn't force this story. He needed to sit back and actually listen to the men who were involved in the program. And by doing so, naturally the story would develop, and it took a while, but it certainly did. For me, when I watch a film, something that I look at closely is the cinematography. That's kind of a lens through which I view film in a general sense. And in Sing Sing, there are some fascinating choices being made here from DP cinematographer Pat Scola. He, again, is not a household name, but is on the rise. He was the director of photography for the Nicolas Cage film Pig from a couple of years ago, and most recently was the DP for the newest A Quiet Place film. What he does here with his camera work, with his lighting, with every kind of individual choice that is made, is that he truly humanizes every individual. There was a choice to use quite frequent but pointed and purposeful close-ups, even extreme close-ups of these inmates. There are shots where it feels like you can see each individual pore of these men. And of course, this is intentional. While Kwedar wasn't able to create a true ensemble piece by having the camera go so close on these inmates, we still feel like we are connected to each and every person as an individual. It's so easy to lump all of these inmates, all of these men together and not really acknowledge their individuality, but by using the camera in this way, we get an intimate portrait of every man alone, and as a result, we feel like we know them on a deeper level. There are, of course, some use of wider shots, particularly in the theater, which of course shows this kind of sense of freedom that the inmates are experiencing here when they're acting, when they're on stage, when they're going through these kind of silly drama warm-ups or drills. But what Scola also does is brilliantly use foreground and background elements in the same shot to, yes, create depth, but also as a reminder that these men are confined. We often see them interact in the theater, but have a door frame in the foreground reminding us that while they may feel free in this moment, they are still confined within this institution. Some other interesting choices include the choice to shoot on Super 16 film. There are a couple of things that kind of result from this choice. One, you have a grainier look. The grains are kind of enlarged because it's shot on a smaller film frame. We also have these pretty gorgeous kind of red halations, particularly when frames are a bit overexposed, maybe when looking out a window. And when I say red halation, I mean you get this kind of halo effect around sources of light, and the main source of light is this window looking out of the prison. So we have this almost angelic effect when these men are looking through the window and kind of dreaming or hoping of their freedom. The grainy look, of course, goes back to this kind of raw and real portrayal of these men. This is not a perfect situation, and to shoot it on super crisp digital format probably wouldn't have been the right choice. Similarly, there's a pretty common use of handheld shots, even with very long lenses, that make the frames a bit shaky. They're not always super smooth. Again, going back to that rawness of the program, of the institutional experience of these inmates. When we do get these locked off tripod shots, they're almost exclusively used when we have these lengthier monologues from some of our characters. By locking off the camera in these moments, there are no visual distractions. As a member of the audience, you are almost forced to, going back to the director's own words, to listen first. And listen we do because of these strong performances. Of course, Colman Domingo is getting a lot of attention here. He was magnificent in Rustin, a film that I really enjoyed from last year, although it had pretty mixed reviews, and was also strong in The Color Purple, and he almost seems primed to take that next leap, to truly become a household name. He has a very difficult task in this film because he's portraying a man who is a decent, albeit not brilliant actor, but Domingo himself is, of course, a brilliant actor. So he needs to hold back at times when his character is performing to make it believable. And he walks that tightrope quite successfully. His most powerful moments, though, are not when he is speaking, although Colman Domingo has one of the most beautiful voices in the world. His most powerful moments are when he is still and silent, the camera is close up on his face, and we just watch his facial expressions. Domingo is an absolute master of the minutiae when it comes to these small micro expressions. No better scene demonstrates this than the final scene of the film, which is, I think, Domingo's strongest moment in the entire project. Outside of Domingo, there is a ton of buzz around Clarence, Divine Eye Maclin, rightly so. He is playing a version of himself, and unlike most of the other inmates that are given smaller supporting roles, he is given a ton here. He is in many ways a foil to Domingo's character. He is this man with a very tough exterior that is difficult to crack. And of course, the back and forth with him and Domingo is so amazing. There are moments that we can see that he is perhaps not perfect in a technical sense when we're talking about acting, but it doesn't matter. The moments that he is strong, he is so unbelievably strong that we just forget about everything else. And somewhat similar to Domingo, he's not at his strongest necessarily when he's even speaking, but his strongest moments are in the background of these frames. When we watch his character processing what's going around outside of him, but also this internal discourse that's occurring within himself. He has played this role, he says, of gangster, in his words, kind of his whole life, and he feels almost obligated to continue playing this role. He's been boxed in to this one character, and it's difficult for him to escape. There is a through line in the film as the inmates are creating a comedy on stage, and there's this line that comes up throughout that is essentially, dying is easy, comedy is hard. And this is kind of a manifestation of Maclin's character's struggle. It's easier for him to play this character rather than to joke, to laugh, to be silly, to participate in these drama games that the men use to warm up. It's easier for him to be tough. And of course, we can take the dying aspect as tragedy when it comes to Shakespeare, but also tragedy within his own life. His son being imprisoned just like he was, and him feeling the need to go back to this life of crime when he leaves. At the end of the day, Sing Sing has been well worth the wait. The performances, the direction, the cinematography all have something to say here. And I think it will be difficult for anyone to not connect on some level emotionally to the experience of these inmates. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe, comment, like, do all those things. The algorithm is the worst, but doing those things does help me out as a human being. Appreciate it. Watch the next one. You're the best. Have a good one. Cheers.